Good evening. It is 7 o'clock. Do you know where your children are? Wait a minute, that was 11 o'clock. Never mind. Do they even do that anymore? I know growing up they did that in Indianapolis. It's 11 o'clock. Do you know where your children are? My mom and dad knew that we'd already been in bed 3 hours and they have to look for us. Except for that one time we snuck out. We're not going to talk about that. We won't talk about that. Good evening. Look at your neighbor, say, I'm glad you're here. Glad you're here. We appreciate you being here. I think this will be the next week will be the last week for this series. Tonight, I think, is week 10, if I got it right. It may be 11. So appreciate your perseverance, hanging in there with us. Tonight, Tracy is going to come and just share with us. I'll introduce her in just a minute. But before we do that, let me just open with some prayer and prayer requests. I know that Kathy Hughes' dad, Jack Wheeler, is King's daughters. We need to continue to remember him. He is getting better, had surgery last week, and he is getting better. I saw a young man. He's not really young, probably my age guy, but that's pretty young. Thank you. His name is Robert Howell. Saw him yesterday. Also, Connie Roach was in the hospital overnight last night, but she's home. Actually, Monday night. She came home yesterday. And Larry Medcalf still at St. Mary's. They may be sending him to Cleveland Clinic. We'll know more, I think, on Friday. A certain test that they did. They're waiting for the result of that test before they decide for sure what to do. But so Jack Wheeler, Robert Howe, Connie Roach, Kevin Roach had oral surgery today, and Larry Medcalf. Those are the ones that I know about. How about you? Yeah. Okay. Hannah, Zane, and Brianne. Let's remember those. Jerry. Uh, yeah. Wow. Francis Crockett. Let's remember Francis Crockett. Eric. Okay. Tyler and Joe are in Ashley Pennington's family. I guess we could say it that way. So remember their biological father. Carol? Helen Pitts and Tom Arnold. Donna? Wow. Yeah. Yeah. That's a tough one. Let's remember them. I know you've already gone once, so let's get it all out this time. Yeah. I didn't know whether to make that request or not. It was a tough situation. Pastor of Centenary United Methodist over in Ashland, who passed away Sunday night, apparently at his own hands. And so I know some of you have been involved with Emmaus Walk. He was very involved in that. Supposed to have been one of the main speakers in just a couple of weeks. And it's just 53. Just nobody knows. It's just a tough situation. Remember the Herndon family. Dave Herndon. What was his wife's name, Crystal? Donna. Remember Donna? Anybody else over here? Over here? Ray? Fred? Okay. Richard Booth and Fred. Mm.
This is a bad situation over there. I don't know. It's my sister's neighbors and stuff, but her husband, I think, is still at hospice in Huntington. Her mom, I think, finally got moved over here at apartment, and the other sister, my sister works with Sherry, is in St. Mary, but she's not on a ventilator. They're really giving her like a lot of steroids and stuff to try to help her. They don't really want to put her on the vent if they don't have to. But that whole family just needs prayer.
Okay. Remember Angie's dad, and what's the relationship with Pam?
They're
Just neighbors, right?
neighbors,
Neighbors.
close neighbors.
Anybody else? Let's stand. Really appreciate you being here tonight. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Ask Him to help us tonight. Lord, we thank you for this opportunity to be in your house. We thank you that you are our God, our healer, our friend, our deliverer, our protector, our provider. Everything that we need you to be, you are, and we are thankful for that. Thankful that you've allowed us the privilege of coming together to continue our journey of looking at the subject of death and dying. God, I know that that's difficult for us to talk about, but you have just seemed to have made it an easier path for us to travel, and I appreciate that and thankful for that. Thankful for all that have participated. Looking forward to tonight, to hearing from Trace. I pray you'll just anoint her, just let her speak to our hearts, Lord God, out of her heart. We pray tonight as we stand on your word that you would just supply every need, all the requests that have been made, those that are in the hospital, those that are sick in body, those that need a spiritual touch, an emotional touch, those who have gone through the suffering of a loved one leaving this life. I pray that you would just comfort them and give them a peace that the world doesn't understand. I pray, God, that we would be able to hear reports of victory and testimonies of how people have been touched and healed by the hand of the Almighty Creator. I pray tonight you'll just touch our church, continue to help us to accomplish what you've put us on this earth to do, and that is to spread the good news of Jesus Christ. So I pray for every teacher, every student, God, that we would just hear from you tonight, from your word, life-changing lessons. So God, tonight in this class, just help us as we continue our journey. We love you. We praise you. We thank you for that. In Christ's name we pray. Someone say amen. Amen. Turn around to 3 or 4 people, shake their hand, hug their neck, bump their knuckles, tweak their cheek. Do something to let them know you're glad to see them in church tonight. Let me remind you again, we are video recording these lessons, these classes. So because of that, we're asking that if you have a question or a comment that you raise your hand, and we will get this microphone to you very quickly. But people that are watching this later need to hear what you're saying and what you're asking. So if you have a question, you have a comment, just raise your hand, wait for a microphone. We'll stick it in your mouth, and you can say what you want to say. And remember, this only works 3 inches from your mouth. As a matter of fact, let me just make a suggestion to you that most sound men will tell you, and that is just lay it on your chin. If you lay it on your chin, you get plenty. If you do it like this, it really just doesn't work. And if you're talking with the microphone like this, you need to keep it within 3 inches of your mouth so that it works the way it's supposed to work. So if you have a question, comment, raise your hand. Tracy Schneider is my friend. She's also in my family. She's my son-in-law's mother. How does that, I don't know, like you have son-in-laws and you have cousin-in-laws by marriage and you have stuff. What do you call someone who's the mother of your son-in-law? I mean, how is, bless. Somebody's trying to get some favor tonight. But I love Tracy. She's just an important part of what we do at Tri-State Worship Center. She works with the ladies ministry. She has a Bible study on Thursday nights. She works with the teens. She just was at Winterfest with us down there for the weekend. She can be very controlling, so just kind of be aware of that. But we love her anyway. She's not bossy. She's instructional. So I'm going to ask her, I ask her because she has, and I know many of us have been touched by this thing called death. I know that. But I know Tracy's been through it on so many different levels, different family members from, and I don't want to share, I'll let her share it, but from a son to a mom to an aunt and some others. And I just ask her just to share her heart and just to share how she embraced those situations and how she handled those situations to try to help us maybe put all these last several 11, 12 weeks together in how we actually experience this thing. So I'm going to ask Tracy to come. Tracy, we are video recording, so you got to kind of stay somewhere around this area if you would, because if you go over there, it's just going to be a voice and no picture. If you have a question or comment, raise your hand. We'll get to you with a microphone as quick as we can. Do you love Tracy Schneider?
I really don't know what 3 inches is, but here we go. For you all that don't know me, I'm Tracy. So just let me start out with a little bit of back history. About 3 years ago, I have a very small family. I had a mom, 2 aunts, and 2 cousins. And me and my 2 cousins was raised very close. Our children called us aunt and uncle. There was no cousin involved. And starting about 3 years ago, in November, I got a phone call, and my niece had died. She was around 35 years old. And so we went through that, and 7 months later, in June, I got a phone call, and her sister had died. She was about 33. 6 months later, in December, we was planning my grandson's 11th birthday. It was the day of his birthday party. And Scotty and I, that is my son, was supposed to go pick up his birthday cake. He had a 75% deaf hearing problem, and I kept ringing his phone and ringing his phone and ringing his phone, and he wouldn't answer. So I called his dad, and I said, Chris, you got to go wake Scotty up. We got to get this show on the road. 60 seconds later, I get a phone call from his stepmom, and they can't revive him. This is 6 months from Sheila's death in December, and that day I lost my son. He had been dead approximately, I don't know, hours before Chris ever found him. He died in a way that was very shocking to me. I felt like I was gut punched. I kind of lost my mind for a little bit. Ryan lost his mind for a little bit. If Terry hadn't have been there, I don't know what would have happened. And that's basically what I did. We took off in the truck. I didn't tell my mom or his brothers what was going on. We just took off. And I called Terry, and he didn't answer. And I called Vicky, and she did answer. And all I could do was scream, Scotty's dead. And they were there almost before I was, and Holly. And so we sat there through the whole process of waiting for the coroner to get there and take his body out. And, of course, I had to go in and see him, being mom, and everybody kept trying to get me not to. And I know this is a personal thing, but I knew that if I didn't go in and see him, that I could not get it in my head. And I knew that I needed to immediately start getting that in my head because I had a very sick mother. 6 months later, in June, after Scotty died, I lost the best friend of my life. I lost my mother. She was very sick. She was on hospice. I know some people don't agree with hospice, but let me tell you something. I've went through 2 deaths with them. They are awesome. My mom or my aunt, neither one ever had a painful moment, and they were took very good care of. So that's where I go. The nieces was hard. I even did the eulogy at one of them's funeral. Scotty was one of the most difficult things that I deal with, and I would love to be able to stand here and tell you all, hey! But death is something that you will deal with on a daily basis for the rest of your life when you use somebody close to you. It leaves a spot inside of you that is empty and it's hollow and it's void that only one thing can fill up. And that's what I found. And that's how I can stand here today. That's how I can have peace of mind. I've had several people ask me, how can you have peace? And it's because I can tell you one thing through the whole process of Scotty. of keeping 2 shirts that still had his aftershave smell on it, hung on my bed, and every time I'd go in the bedroom, I would hug those shirts and I would just breathe him in. It made him alive to me. And I went in there one day, and I just knew in my spirit, put him up. And I was like, I don't want to put him up. But I knew, and you can say, God told me, you can say you just knew in your spirit or what it was. But standing in the bedroom that day, I knew that this was how I would get through this. Was when in my spirit I knew that God knew the right time to allow my son to exit this earth. And once I knew that God knew the right time for him to exit this earth, then I have peace. Do I miss him? Yeah. When I'm driving down the road and I go over the other lane, do I hear him scream, Mom, watch what you're doing. You drive crazy. Yeah, I do. Do I cry? No, I laugh. Because I'm like, hey, you are so right still. And with my mom, it was a totally different thing because, Scotty was unexpected. It was, like I said, a gut punch. With Mom, I watched her, and she was sick, and she suffered. But I watched her leave this world ready to go. And I'm telling you, if you got that with you, then I don't know what else anybody could tell anybody else how to deal with this, except I have a funny way of looking at things. And when things first happen, you feel like grief is your worst enemy. You do. But as time goes on, you find out that grief becomes something totally different. Grief becomes that thing that causes you to have pleasant memories that can bring a smile to your face. And grief even turns into this thing that causes you to know that you miss someone, but you know that they're okay. So you learn to live and you learn to go on. But most of all, what you learn to do is you learn to understand that. And I think this is where we get it messed up so much, is that we say, I know God's got it in control. But when it comes to death, that's when you can't say it. That's when you got to know it. From the depths of your heart, from the innermost part of your being, you've got to know it. And you got to be able to talk about it. You got to be able to share about it. You got to be able to just embrace what God does in your life. So my greatest comfort was this. God knows what he's doing. He knows exactly when to take somebody, and he knows exactly when to leave them. Scotty could have went a lot of times. One time Jerry could have took him out with his gun because Scotty was trying to steal his car, but he didn't. And I can't tell you the times. One time we rushed him to the hospital and he was bagged and he wasn't breathing. And all of a sudden he come up and he come home. But it wasn't time for him to go in those times. Because Scotty was not in the place he needed to be. But I had 3 wonderful years with my son that was a lifetime of seeing him be in church, of seeing him understand God's love, of being able to do one of the greatest things that he could never do his whole life long. And that was just through confession And through talking and listening to what Terry had to say, he learned to forgive himself. And in learning to forgive himself, then he could accept forgiveness from God. So regardless of what else happens, I just thank God that he knew exactly when to cause him to exit this earth. So that is pretty much what my life has been. In October, Mom's baby sister, who took me at the age of 3 and raised me, died of cancer. So I stand before you today happy and blessed with a great extended family because God done took all mine. There's none left but us 3 kids. But it's okay because it caused me to realize that as great as my mother was, Candace, and as much as she stood beside me in everything, I realized who my true best friend was. And no matter the hole that was left inside of me when Scotty left, I realized that nothing can pour out of me because the Spirit plugged it up. So I haven't lost anything, but God just keeps filling it up and filling it up with greater and better and more marvelous things. So as the old saying goes, death is not an easy thing to deal with, but just make sure you deal with it. And don't lock it up inside somewhere, because if you do, it's going to eat you up. Of course, I had great friends, and I had a great church that helped me through it. And I shed many a tear on the end of my couch. But pretty soon, you find comfort. I didn't allow nobody to stand on one end of my couch for 6 months, because that's where my mom sat. And that was my mom's place. And if you come in my house and you stay at my mom's place, I would very politely say, you need to move. Nobody sits there. That's where Mom sat. And that's because I was in full-fledged grieving process. Now, my place on the couch is where my mom sat. Now, if you come to my house today, I might ask you to move, but it won't be because it's where Mom sat. It's because it's where Tracy sits. I found comfort in something so simple that when I would look at it to begin with, brought me pain. And I didn't want nobody to touch. But as I allowed God to draw me closer to Him, accept His love, that place on the end of the couch became a great comfort and not a curse. So that's what we have to do. We have to learn to accept what God does. That's just the bottom line. I mean, that's the whole thing. That's all I can tell you, is just accept that God knows what's best. And we've all heard this over and over and over. My sadness was not for Scotty, and my sadness was not for my mom. I grieved my relationship I missed what I had with them. I promise you they're not missing what they had with me. I promise you, if you could talk to one of them, they'd say she'd be okay. But I grieved my relationship with them. So I think where a lot of us makes our mistake is we hit that grief point, and then we don't want to start forming relationships again because we're afraid of being hurt, we're afraid of losing, we're afraid of the whole process all over again. And that's how come we stay lonely and sad and really messed up in our hearts and heads. So form relationships in your grief, because what you're grieving is your relationship that you had with the person. And there's all kinds of relationship out there to have. The main one is your relationship with God, because that's what you was created for, to be in relationship with Him. So I didn't move. I stayed frozen in one spot.
I got a question.
Go ahead.
I know with your mom, that was a process that you were able to kind of walk through with her. And of course, with Scotty, that was, like you described, a punch in the gut. Nobody saw that coming. Is there a way that if you can even remember, at what point did you finally accept the fact that, God's in control? I know that at the initial moment, obviously not. I mean, we're human. Your response was a human response. But can you think about how much time before you finally realize this God's in control? Which I really appreciate the fact that you said that, because that is the ultimate answer. Mm-hmm. God is in control. We sign DNRs. We sign different types of medical power. In the end, God is the one who decides when there's life and when there's death. Mm-hmm. And so I appreciate that. But I don't know if you can put a time frame on that or not.
With Scotty, it took a while. I would say probably it was after Mom died. See, when Scotty died, my mother was already very sick. Very sick. I was already spending, 15 days since in the hospital with her. She was already very ill. So when he died, I had an escape plan. After you get through funerals and services and stuff, and then you go back home, I had a very sick mother that I had to sleep on the love seat beside of, that I had to take care of, that I had to help to the bathroom, that I had to spend all this time in the hospitals with. So it was very easy to click Scotty out of my head. When Mom died and I come home from hospice, I hit the couch, and I don't think I moved for 2 weeks. I was sick physically. I felt like I was dying physically. My mind went numb. I didn't like nobody. I didn't want nobody to tell me they were sorry. I didn't, not to be rude, but I just particularly didn't care how sorry nobody was. Okay? My son was gone. My mother was gone. And now I didn't have no distractions. So it was like, bam, face it or else. So, of course, at that time, Ryan, he still lived at home, and I had to deal with him because I had to look at him because he was there. But I was like, go to work, leave me alone, do your thing. The other 2 boys, I was like, I don't want to see you. Don't come around me. Don't want nothing to do with you. And after about 2 weeks, I thought, okay, I got to get up and I got to start doing something. And I would say probably about 6 to 8 months after that, after Mom died, is when it just hit me, you know, because I would lay with my face in the floor and I would pray and I would cry. And, you know, I'd hold on to them shirts. And believe it or not, in all that time, them shirts never lost their smell. You know, and I would hold on to them shirts. The boys asked for them. I said, if you touch them, I'll cut your fingers off. You know, nobody gets these shirts. They're mine. And I would sit in my bedroom floor and I'd hold them and I'd smell them and I'd cry. And then I'd get mad because Mom wasn't there for me to cry to. And I guess it was anywhere between 6 to 8 months after Mom died that I was just straightening up the house. And I had just praying and it just hit me. It didn't hit me when I was praying, TT. I walked in the bedroom and it just hit me, put them shirts up. And I was like, I don't want to put the shirts up. And I just knew I had to put the shirts up. It was time to put them away. And as I was putting them up in this little bag to put them up, it just was a feeling and it come over me. And it was like, oh, God, you knew exactly when to take him. And I could just see it so clear. And it was one of the most awesome things, Crystal, I ever witnessed and seen in my life, to know that God was merciful enough to take him at the exact right time. And then after that, I didn't question it no more. I still had a little bit more time with Mom to go. She wasn't. She was supposed to be here and be my friend.
I wanted to share real quickly that when you brought Scotty to Christ Temple Church for Eddie James' concert, and Eddie had an altar call, and I hadn't seen Chris since the incident. He was trying to get in my mother's car, him and Chris, and it was like 3 o'clock in the morning, and I don't ever sleep, and I heard something, and I had a 9mm, and it was actually kind of funny that night, but it was very dangerous. Chased him across the field. One went one way down the street, and the other went the other, and they come across Chesapeake Elementary School and ran on the old 50, ran right into each other, knocked each other down. And I'm standing there with a 9mm, and they both out here with track stars, ran track in school, and sheriff's deputy said, Jerry, the only reason you caught them is because they were high. If they were straight, they'd have smoked you. And so they took him home, and we ended up in court, and I showed up, and I asked the judge for mercy, and I said, very well could have pulled that trigger, but I have my own son, and realized what was going on, and hadn't seen Chris since then, probably, 20 years, I guess, I don't know. And they show up at Christ Temple, and we have an altar call, and he walks up to me. He says, do you remember me? And I said, I don't think so. And he said, I'm the guy that you had the 9mm on. I was trying to break in your mom's car. And he looked at me and he said, will you forgive me? And I said, I forgave you when we come to court that day and asked mercy on your life. And hugged him, and we went up on stage. I introduced him to Eddie James, and the altar call wasn't working. Nobody was coming. I mean, Eddie James dancers, if you ever know them, it just wasn't working. We shared the testimony, how God spared Chris and Scotty's life, and how the incident and how it showed up. And I said, you never know when God's going to call you home. And Scotty was hugging me, and I said, look where this young man is when he was there, but look where he's at now. And I said, won't you come? Scotty said, I can't remember exactly what he spoke real quickly, and he said, looked at Eddie and said something. You know, the altar packed, that altar filled up, did it not, across the whole front with Scotty. So if you never knew, he did an altar call, and it packed the house. And I wanted to show you something. This is something I can send you, but it's really precious. And it says, this best way to heal a broken heart is to give God all the pieces.
Yeah, we took the youth group there to see Eddie James back in the day. And he went with us, so it was good. I never knew. Said he was sorry, though.
I love you, Tracy.
I love you.
You know how much you've helped me. This church, Pastor Terry, you know, It was a team effort to get me back to my life. I've experienced a lot of death in my life, but never one that hit me like my mother's. That was very hard on me, and you was talking about how long that lasts. And I was just sitting here figuring it out. My mom passed in 2015. I was just sitting here being floored at it's actually that amount of time. And it always seems like yesterday. And then some days it seems like 20 years ago. I don't understand that time in my head, but I have noticed that just this year, I don't stand in the closet anymore with my mom's robe wrapped around my neck. And, I moved into her house and I said, don't touch that, don't touch that, don't touch that. Everything had to stay the same. And just this year, I've been moving things around and putting things in other areas and trying to live my life in that house now. So I'm floored at the time that it's actually been to get me where I'm not hanging out in the closet with her robe.
Right.
Goodness, PT, why don't we just sit down and relax for a minute? Tracy, you said that, they took your son just instantly and it wasn't, it was a gut punch. Just a couple of days ago, I got the phone call from a guy that works with Chuck. His wife and I both are really good friends with Juanita Mays. She was 30, and they had her fifth grader found her, and she was already gone at that point. And when I got the phone call, it was one of those things where I didn't understand. I didn't know. And even now I'm still kind of like, it doesn't seem real. And so they called us the other day and told us that she had had a heart attack at 30. And the obituary hit the papers today, and her stuff is tomorrow. And it's one of those things where it's a gut thing, and I don't understand why. Like, and her road is like going towards our house, and I've avoided it since then. And today I was with Sammy because we were enrolling her in her new school, and I took that road and, stopped where she used to live. And it was one of those things where God just said, I've got her and she's okay. And I think sometimes it's a jealousy thing, that you're jealous because she has what you want. And, it's tough. So, like you said, that gut wrench, I mean, it's just hard. It's unbelievable.
Sorry. I think the important thing to remember about grief is that, one, everybody goes through it differently. And it's always, if you're supporting someone through that process, you should just do that. Just support that process. Don't try to coach them through it. Don't try to tell them how you grieve. You allow that person to grieve the way that they need to. If they need to sit in a closet and hold somebody's robe, that's what they need to do. And the other thing I think is that people sometimes, especially women, will try not to grieve because we have, whoever has to be the strong one, you have to keep it together. But the truth is, if you don't allow yourself to go through that process, you will continue to go through it. If you don't allow yourself to be angry, you're always going to come back to that. And so, we've had grief support here before, and it's one of those things that people don't like to talk about, and they don't like to verbalize their grieving process. But it's so important to just let yourself feel that. I mean, we tell people all the time, you can be mad at God. He can handle it. It is okay. If that's what you need to be right now, then that's what you need to be. But allow yourself to go through that process.
That is so true. You do, because you get angry, and like I said, I told my other kids out in my face, I don't like you all. I don't want you around me. And that is so true. It sounds really silly, but one of the fondest memories that I have of my daughter-in-law and that I will always cherish was the day Scotty died. And I was a mess. I mean, you can ask, I was a mess. I was like crazy mess. Like, I didn't know. I sat there between Vicky and Holly, and I didn't know what to do. And then I had to go in and see him. And when I seen him, I didn't want nobody else to see him. And I was trying to keep other people from going in. And somebody who I won't say whose house it was was allowing people to go in, and I was trying to stop him, and he smarted off to me. And I ain't never seen nobody move so fast to get between me and them as what Holly did. And she was like, "You just shut up. You don't talk to her like that. You do what you want to do, and she can grieve the way she wants to grieve, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da." And I was like, I love her. But that it is true, and you need that. You need somebody standing there and telling you, it's okay to be angry. It's okay to fall on somebody's couch in the middle of the night when they're in their pajamas, and you want to just bang on their door, and when they open it, you just burst in and just cry. Just boo-hoo, cry. You get the ugly. Somebody has to be able to get your ugly. Just how it is.
I think it's important to remember, and you both have said it, and Crystal is that there's no cookie cutter way of doing this. I mean, with 5 stages of grief, first we deny it, and then we're going to be angry, and then we're going to compromise, and then we're going to, and finally we accept it. All those might be steps, but they don't necessarily work in the same order for everybody. They don't last the same amount of time for everybody. And I do think that it goes back to what you said earlier, and that is, at some point we come to the point where we embrace the fact that God's in charge, and that He, someone said, well, somebody's in a car crash and they died. How's God in charge? The person didn't have to die in a car crash. God could have rescued them out of that. God could have prevented that. So I think we do have to get to that point where we say God is in charge, and I in my humanity am going to deal with it somehow. I know when my dad died, and anybody that's been around me any length of time, I mean, in most areas I idolized my dad. He was an incredible, creative, perseverant man, but he should have died when I was 3. He got hit by a train, and he lived for 50-some years after that. And so we constantly lived with, okay, well, maybe next week, maybe next month, maybe next year he'll. And eventually when he died, I think it was like with your mom, you kind of went through the process and you kind of walked with them. But then when you get a phone call I had a cousin that died in a fiery crash. She was a truck driver, and she up near Chicago was in a wreck and died in a fire, and that impacted me more than my own dad. But I think it was because I had time to process Dad and walk through that with him, and with her it wasn't. It kind of like a situation with you and your mom and you and Scotty. So I think everybody does it differently. It's not cookie cutter, but I do hope that some of the information that's been shared over the last several weeks has been helpful to us in how that we deal with it. So. Somebody else? Ray, look at you. It's like Pastor Terry's the back of the room. Let me make him walk back up there.
I could have come back here and got it. I just wanted to say that I watched last Wednesday's because I wasn't here. I was in Columbus, and I noticed that when what was her? Yeah. Beth, yes. I noticed when Beth asked, who in the room was prepared, with everything, that no one spoke up. So I just wanted to ask it again tonight. Is nobody here ready? Wow.
How do you mean ready?
Ready with all your arrangements. You went through all.
You're not spiritually ready.
Oh, we're working on that with you. No, I meant, financially. Excuse me? No? I was listening to the podcast on YouTube, and I was thinking, if I had been here last Wednesday, I would have been the only one that was able to stand up and say, I am totally ready to go.
Excuse me.
I guess, I guess you just, well, I mean, he has life insurance, and then, and I have, but I'm not. That's where ours is. Probably everyone else is probably like that too, but well, I'm not ready to go yet. I probably should already.
When Fred and I went and done that together, when we got home that day after taking care of everything, right down to the open and close, it's all done. I put it all in a big envelope, and I wrote on the outside of it, "Hey kids," and I listed all of our kids' names. I said, "You know that big inheritance you was hoping to get? It's in this envelope." That's how much it cost.
I think it's okay to be pre-planned. Absolutely.
From on this end of it, with being the child. So my parents, we talked a couple of months ago, or a few months ago now, and they've always, or not say always, but they for a long time have had, they've purchased. I call it a hole in the wall, but it's their drawer in a mausoleum in Barbersville, and they've had that for a while. And so we talked a couple of months ago, and they've moved their residence to South Carolina. But before they left, they had made all their arrangements with the funeral director. They've bought their caskets. They've bought, they've got everything lined out, everything but the preachers, and which Mom's already laid those out for the most part, except they keep dying on her. But the point that I want to make is that's comforting to me. I listen to when Crystal comes home and she tells me these stories and about the different situations that folks are put in, and and I've watched Crystal's grandparents, and I've taken notice of what's left behind, what that of everything else that's going on in the situation. It's a relief to me that that's one less thing that I have to worry about, or my sisters have to worry about, or anyone else has to worry about, that we can just focus on what the important stuff is. Instead of, well, now we got to rush and take care of this paper or that, sign that and move this and all this other. It's relieving to me that all of that is already taken care of.
No, I'm coming, Ray. And you never shut up. I said you talk.
So just listening to it's exactly why me and Fred did that, because the difference between Fred's father passing away and my mother passing away was so different. His dad had everything paid for. When he passed away, we went to the funeral home and all the questions was already answered and everything was already done. The only terrible thing that happened was that the funeral directors played on my husband's grief and said, the particular casket that he picked out is not really the greatest, so that happened. But anyway, it was already paid for, and at least Fred had that comfort of knowing, okay, I don't have to do anything. When my mom passed away, she had nothing. And so we had a discussion before she got where she couldn't talk, and she was like, just cremate me. And I was like, Mom, why would you say that? She was like, well, because I don't want to be a burden to you kids, and it's cheaper. What a horrible thing for my mom to have to think about, And I just don't want to put my kids in that position at that time, because I know my mind was gone. So I couldn't think, and I don't want them to be where I was. I'm sorry.
I know it's going on like 10 years now from my dad passing. I'm the oldest one he's got, and I've got a brother that's 9. Never got to see that. His the widow was pregnant with him, and it's just I was mad at myself when he passed because a week before he called and asked me to ride home. I said no, I can't. I was on the fire department. We're at the meeting. Just started the meeting. I'm at the meeting. We just started. I can't. The following week, I get a phone call from the assistant chief on the fire department, who was also a sheriff's deputy. Asked me, missing. I said, I don't know. He goes, I go, why? Which is now his widow's in there filing missing persons report. I don't know. Let me call my grandma and grandpa. I'll find out what's going on. No answer from them. 3:30, I get home. I'm home from work, sitting on the couch. I get a phone call from my grandpa. They found him. So do what? They found him. And it hit me what it was. And I jumped in the shower and tried to get out to their house. It took me 3.5 hours to drive 15 minutes because I couldn't leave my house because everybody was calling and checking on me because it hit the paper that day that Chuck McFarland passed. They found him. They didn't go no farther than the name. So they went past the name was the age. Nobody passed that. Everybody thought it was me. Just called to make sure I was okay. And when I finally got out there, it just wasn't expecting it. Nothing. Didn't know he was missing. Nothing. It's just, man, my grandpa's retired police chief of Ironton, and a whole bunch of stuff's going on with the case going on. And the detective working the case was a real good friend of the family. His stepdaughter burned up in a house out by my grandma and grandpa. He come out there. I was stopped by and check on him. He was there. Says, "You want us to work this case? Or you want me to deal with my family?" Me and my grandpa both go, "Deal with your family, because we know that's what you tell us." And we left it. Didn't get into none of the details what happened, because it's best to leave it that way, because it was God's plan. I was mad at myself for a long time because of telling my dad no. Because if I could have seen him one more time. I know me seeing him wouldn't, he still wouldn't be here because it was God's time. It's just hard to comprehend when it happened. I had alienated myself from everybody. My grandma and grandpa, my friends on the fire department, people I work with, everything. I was helping with Cub Scouts, everything. I quit doing it all. I was at the mall paying my cell phone bill. One of the scouts I didn't see him come running and tackled me because of he missed me that much at Scouts. And it got me, there's people I need to help me through this. And I didn't realize who that many people actually cared. I know they did. I just blocked them out.
One of the greatest lessons that I've learned through death is I don't never take a moment granted with nobody I love no more. If I say something, I want to make sure I mean it. And not always do I, especially with kids, but I always try to think before I speak. And I just cherish the people I care about. I mean, I cherish every minute with everybody that I care about. I just, that's get as much as you can while you can, so you have that comfort.
Oh, sorry. This thing was in the way. I couldn't see you.
I think that cherishing your time with people, when I hit 60, it seems like my whole life changed. And sorry for the voice, but anyway, my mother on Tuesdays, I usually spend Tuesdays with my mother now, since I don't work, quote, full time. But anyway, so it's like everything changed because I began to think more about the future and how short of time is left and how much you need to make an impact and how much my mother's time is shorter. I mean, that's reality. And so on Tuesdays, I take her out. We go shopping. We hang out. We'll go to lunch. But it's something I never had time for. It was like when I worked, that's what I did. I worked until 7, 8 o'clock at night. And when it come to Saturdays, anybody that knows me, Saturday is Harold's day with me. It's his day. Don't try to interrupt it. But it was like you begin to look at things for what they really are, and you begin to cherish the time you do have. And planning for the future, you know, my whole thought was that I was unhealthy. And I didn't want my time to be short. So it's all about doing everything to make an impact, to be here longer, to build relationships, to share the gospel, to help the hurting, to be out there. And 60 did that for me. I don't know, I can't explain it, but it was like 60 was a wake-up call for me. Should have been a wake-up call at 40, at 50. But it was like 60 did something inside of me that it was about life and family and being with others. And sometimes I still fall short of that. But it's like this whole thing on death and dying. It was like the first week, I couldn't sleep. I was just done for. I could not sleep after it because all I could think about was grieving, hurting people. And as we've talked and everything and talked about how we struggle with grief, I was a teenager when I went through the grief process. And you're talking years and years ago, there wasn't grief counselors. There wasn't any of that. It was just, you know what, this happened. This was horrible. We need to get over it and move on. I mean, I was back to school and everything else, and it was like there was none of this to help us process. And it's like, so to me, it's like with hospice and everything we've learned, is there's so much to help us through that process, and the anger and the grieving and the funniness of some things that happen in the process. And you're like, can you believe that happened? Because there was things, and I look back now and I think, can you believe that happened? But it was like you have to find those moments after the process. But even during the process and before the process. If anything, to me, this has showed us how we need to live every day to the fullest. And we do need to share with others and be an encourager.
Absolutely.
Just recently, I had some, I guess you'd say bad luck, but really I've turned it around with these classes and stuff. It's been really good luck because I had a house with my grandchildren living in, and I lost it, so I had to go live with my mom and dad. And at first I thought of it being a failure. But then after I've been in this class long enough, I don't think it's a failure anymore. It's God. He's telling me he wants me to spend more time with my parents, which I didn't have time because I was constantly taking care of them and not in their house. But the fact is, I've come to terms with it, and I don't feel like a failure anymore. And I'm just happy because my parents are almost 90. So, we're going to have this time, and we've really enjoyed it. We spent a lot of time together. We take turns making dinner, things like that you just don't take time for before. And I've learned to appreciate it. And I finally, just like I said, come to terms that God has decided this is what He wants me to do right now. So, that's what I'm doing, and I don't really feel like a failure anymore. And I'm just happy that I can spend this time with my parents, because I know they may not have very much longer on this earth.
No. No. Okay, yes. You get the last word, Candace.
Because it's all about me. And always has been.
That is my friend, and she is telling the God's honest truth.
I want to be serious and publicly thank PT and Crystal, because this has been I don't want to cry.
You want me to hold it? Here, let me hold it for you.
Will you get on your knees?
I will.
Okay.
You need me to? Will that help the process?
No. See, it's all good now. It's all good. No, I'm okay. I really am now.
All right.
You can still get on your knees if you want to. When PT said he was going to start this class back in December, I told Bill, I said, I'm definitely going to be there. I'm going to be at every class. And then, like, the second class is when Crystal had said something. Oh, it was about mourning your own death. And I said, well, my mom, and she's mourning her own death. That's all she talks about. And everybody was so encouraging, and Crystal said just the right thing. And then 2 weeks later, she was gone. But those 2 weeks, I had decided after that point, because we would fight, and we were together 24/7 for 48 years. So we would fight, and we would fuss, and we would get on each other's nerves. But I know I'm still sad, but I'm okay, because I know she's okay. And sometimes I feel like I'm not mourning enough, even though I'm in the closet crying. I picked up a piece of mail that she had already wrote a bill out and hadn't mailed it yet, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't mail this bill because it has her handwriting on it. But I'm so thankful for this class, and so it was such a brave move, and I think it's helped everybody, and I never thought that I would be experiencing death right in the middle of this, of my best friend, of the person that knows me better than anybody in the world. But I'm not sad, even though I may have, my eyes are sweating. But I told PT this, since I do get the last word, and it's all about me. And a couple of weeks ago, I was praise and worship, and I had my hands up, and PT knows this story. And, when you're up front, in front of everybody, sometimes you come back and you're like, oh my gosh, what did I do? How did I look? Not that anybody's looking at me. I came back and I said, Bill, and I was crying and my makeup was off. I said, did I look okay up there praying? And he said, yes, Rose.
Yes, Rose. Just a couple quick things, and we'll pray and be dismissed. Obviously, the number one thing to be ready to go is spiritually for people to be ready. And I don't remember if I told you this last week or not. I went to see a lady at the hospital. Felt like a failure. Was asked to go because they didn't feel like she was ready to go, and she's stage 4 cancer, and it's bad. And I just talked to her for a while, and then, of course, turned it to a spiritual conversation. It's not about another surgery. It's not about another bag of juice. It's about what about after this life, and how are you there? And she said, I don't really know. I said, I would love to pray with you, and we can get that taken care of. That you just mark that off your list. We can get that. And she's like, I don't think so. Yeah. And but maybe a seed planted, somebody else come along. So I think that's number one. Number two, I think incredible thing that Tracy said is that, she's not really mad at her mom or Scotty or her aunt. She just misses that relationship. I think sometimes it's where we focus our grief. It's where we focus our anger. And I think that's cool. And then thirdly, I think in the end, we have to be those believers that say God is in control. Again, Josh Brown's death, we've talked about it for 15 years now, 14 years. God could have prevented that. Could have held that lady up at the Grandview light there for 2 seconds, and that would have never happened. And I believe he could have, but he didn't. So I believe he must have allowed that. Why? Who knows? Several people saved at his funeral. That's one good thing, but who knows? I don't know. Last thing, and I hope you don't mind me. My first memory of Scotty, he had come maybe once or twice, and I knew who he was, and some of you might remember Scotty. He's had that cute face, but also, it was kind of mysterious. And praise and worship got done, and I got ready to start speaking, and he got up from where he was sitting. And, I'm kind of watching like, oh, boy, what's going on now? And he came up and he sat down in the front rows over in the old sanctuary. And he just sat there, and I thought, man, what is this guy doing? I was kind of afraid. And so afterwards, I said, Tracy, what's that all about? He can't hear very well. And when the praise and worship was over, he wanted to make sure he heard what you said. So he got up and said, and he would do that every service. And at his funeral, we passed out some chairs. And I still have some of them in my office. Some chairs saying, who's going to fill Scotty's chair? Because he would always get up and sit in that front row. So I appreciate what you said, because I think maybe that was a good lesson for me to learn, that I missed that relationship. It's not that I'm mad that he's gone. I'm not mad that he went. He's not with us now. It's just I missed that relationship with him. That was a cool way of putting it. Let's stand. Appreciate you being here one more week. I need to talk to Holly. I know she was going to come back in for a few minutes to finish up what she had started 2 weeks ago with the hospice, but she's got the flu and an ear infection, so she's not here tonight. And I don't know if she wants to miss 2 Wednesday nights after Winterfest of being with her crew over there, Ohio. So I'll talk to her. But we will be finishing up next week if she doesn't come in. I just want to kind of just bundle it all up and get some Q&A out of the way and move on. I think the next series I want to do is a home for your heart. It's talking about building a home spiritually, that God is going to be center of our life. So I think that's where I'm headed. We'll see. Lord, thank you for allowing us this time together. Thank you for Tracy Schneider, her witness and her testimony, her realness and her authenticness. I just pray that the things that she said would just stir in us, help us to realize that you are a God that's in charge. Even in those moments when things happen that don't make sense to us and brings an immediate emotional human response, in the end, you're a God that's in control of the universe. Nothing happens outside of your control. And whether you directly cause it or it slips through your fingertips, we know that you're a God that's in charge. So help us to embrace that and get a hold of that. I pray in a few moments when we leave this place, you keep us safe. God, we love you. We bless you. We praise you. Ask all this in Jesus' name. Someone say amen. Amen. Shake someone's hand, hug someone's neck, bump someone's knuckles, tell them you're glad to see them in church, and we'll see you the next time.